Jack wrapped his hand around the door handle, listening as heavy footsteps became louder and closer with each thump, lifted his shotgun and swung open the door and tumbled into the wall. Claire remained behind the door, behind cover. "Jack, what do we do?" Claire said. The hallway was dead end just behind them. Mr. X trudged past the chief's heavy oak door. Their options were dwindling fast. Jack felt the weight of his bulky shotgun weight from his hands. He got an idea. He lifted the weapon and pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening. Jack's ears were ringing at the shockwave from the blast that could be felt in his chest. The slub of BBs tore into X's chest, sending him stumbling backwards. "It's working! Keep hitting him until we get past!" Jack stepped forward, closing the distance between him and Mr. X. He pulled the trigger again. The shot rang out into the hall, and the shotgun jumped violently with each blast in his hands. Mr. X fell back again. With hardly any time to recover, Mr. X went to a crouch. "Go, Claire, now!" Jack said, as he sprinted forward. He kept his weapon trained on X as he followed suit to exit. Claire slipped by, successfully heading down the hall towards the reception waiting room. Jack was where he pressed his back against the corner of the wall and slipped past. Just as he was about to clear the monster, a large gray hand grasped his neck and twisted him around to throw him to the wall. Jack could feel his shoulder blades contort as they resisted being squeezed into the wall. Jack let out a small yelp as Mr. X lifted his hand. Jack closed his eyes as he felt the shotgun fell from his grasp as he began to lose his breath. Just then there was a spurt of blood from Mr. X's ash-gray veiny hand around Jack's neck. The arrow had pierced through the wall, and his hand was pinned to the wall. Jack fell to the ground, coughing and wheezing for much oxygen as he could drive in. His neck was sore from the brutal attack. He felt his own neck in a tinge of pain as he dragged his fingers over the fresh bruises. "Jack, get up!" Claire yelled from down the hall. Instinctively, he got to his feet and pumped his legs as hard as he could, plugging the shotgun from the floor as he went. Claire ran ahead towards the fire escape door from before. Jack's eyes went wide as he felt cold, dead fingers clasp around his ankle. "Shit, you gotta be kidding!" Jack fell to the floor. His shotgun went flying towards the room door. Jack cranked his head to see Mr. X's cold, dead stare, his lips quivering in frustration. "You can't let him corner you again. Do not let him get to you." Jack pulled his Springfield 9mm from his holster and aimed it down between his legs. "Let go!" he yelled as he pulled the trigger in rapid succession, sending in several shots rounds into the dark humanoid face. Chunks of its fleshy exterior tore apart the hot lead and ripped through the monster's skull. "How is he still moving?" "Jack!" Claire screamed as she drew her Browning and tried to get it a bead on Mr. X from down the hall. "Claire, go! Get out of here! It wants me! Go find Leon!" Claire seemed to struggle with the decision, stepping forward before lowering her weapon and throwing her shoulder out to the door just behind her. Just like that, she was gone. It was one last thing Jack had to worry about. She could handle a few zombies. This thing was a whole lot of another ball game. It seemed to seek him out whenever they ran into it. Its eyes were always focused on him. Jack fired twice more and felt his grasp weaken. Just then the slide of his weapon locked his back as it went empty. Jack released to the side with the lever under the chamber and slid the weapon back into its holster and graspingly hit one with its knife. In one smooth motion he slashed, cutting the man's hand skull still holding his shoe. Mr. X released his grip on one of his fingers folded back, hanging by a thread on the knuckle. Jack got to his feet once more, and he grabbed his shotgun from the floor. "Don't follow Claire. It would only endanger her further." He slammed his shoulder onto the waiting room door and limped through the waiting room without stopping. He hit the opposite side of the door just with much force and threw open the door closed behind him. "Great. Now where do we go, genius?" Jack decided to go back against down the main hall. He needed to get to another room as quickly as possible. He raced down the balcony and hurried across the opposite side of the main hall second floor. His footsteps echoed loudly as he approached the library double doors. They were a saving grace. Just then he heard another pair of heavy footsteps, the familiar thudding of Mr. X as it ripped through the door of the waiting room. It saw Jack entering the library and leapt over the railing and landed to earth with a shaking thud. It walked with purpose, closing its distance between the other side of the main hall, passing right by the main hall desk and foundation. Jack threw the door closed and entered the library in a sprint. He could barely just make out of Mr. X's hands, pulling him up to the railing. "You shitting me? He can climb?" Jack turned and hit the stairs into a sprint door at the top. Mr. X just entered the library doors and entered the sprint, tearing the carpeted stairs behind Jack as he reached for Jack's boots. Jack could feel the thuds of X's boots shaking the floorboards of the library. Jack sprinted through the door and at the top of the stairs and didn't even bother slamming it behind him. He took into his new surroundings. He was in a small balcony, probably about 12 feet long to the other door. He quickly reached to the new door and just entered as Mr. X appeared on the balcony, turning its head to see Jack make his escape. "Please God, don't let it corner me!" Jack entered a dark and dusty room. He hadn't recognized it anything special. There was a lone set of stairs at the back end of the room. Some old metal parts laid scattered, and a bucket of tools knocked over the center. Jack raced and kicked the orange home improvement store bucket out of his path. He hit the narrow wooden stairs running, having to breathe out as he reached the top of the steps. He realized that he was at a dead end. Jack backed into a wall and moved his spare magazine from his pants, slapped it onto his weapon. He pulled it back and let the next round take into its chamber. As his back hit the wall, he felt something poke him. He took off his eyes of Mr. X. Pulling up an X was this narrow stairway. He had turned to see a handle of sorts sticking out of the wall. Jack pulled the handle and a large-sized vent shaft open. "No way!" He holstered his weapon, peered down. There was no clear indication of how deep the shaft might go. Jack didn't even think for a moment. He slipped in feet first and turned back too close to the shaft to see Mr. X reaching for him from the dusty old room. Jack slammed it shut and let himself slide down the dark passageway with a little control over the speed of his descent. Claire held the Browning close to her as she listened for any sign of movement inside the dark hallway where she left Jack for dead. She could hear 2 more bangs that have to been his handgun. Then everything went silent. Still in the night air, at the cawing nearby crows, overtaking the dimly lit atmosphere, as she struggled to hear any sign of life. She waited for a minute or two before she gathered up the courage. She lifted the handgun and reached out for the doorknob with her right hand. The doorknob shifted slightly, but wouldn't turn. "Oh, nice move, genius. You've locked yourself out." She felt her disappointment drop like an iron ball in the pit of her stomach. "Jack," she whispered to herself. She had to find him. She had to know if he was gone. She wouldn't take unnecessary risks, but she owed him at least that much. Claire had turned around the outside stairwell that they had climbed earlier in the night and pointed her weapon down the stairs. She watched the corners closely and checked for any undead who might have hopped the fence to the police department. A number of them chambered on the fence, shaking it violently, trying to reach her any way they could. Apparently these monsters weren't exactly the brightest. They could shake the fence all day and never considered going over it. Claire hurried down the stairs and raced past the group of undead and opened the door at the bottom. Once again, found herself at the detective's office. It was one of the first rooms that she and Jack had checked together. She did a quick glance around the room, seemed untouched since they had last passed through. She kept her Browning drawn at the ready, and she slipped between the desks. She kept her eyes on the officers' corpses as she moved. Her room smelled worse than any other in the entire station. So many had died in this room. Claire was about halfway through the hallway room when she heard it, a shuffling of papers behind her. She had turned and raised her weapon, found nothing. She had accidentally stepped through a loose papers? Claire lowered her gaze into the wood floors, but saw nothing. Something or someone had definitely moved. Over the hand fans and dust on their blades, she peeked over the detectives' desks, but no one was hiding. What the hell is going on? Claire felt in the back of her head that gnawing feeling that you get when you feel at least your every move is being watched. She never considered herself a paranoid person, so this sensation terrified her. She circled in place, scanning around the room with her gun drawn. If it were a zombie, she would have been seeing something by now, and those things couldn't just stop, and they weren't exactly very stealthy. Get a hold of yourself. Things can move when no one's around. Claire's lips curled into a light smile. She felt silly, or was just trying to make herself feel better. She lowered her handgun and kept walking. Her eyes continued to scan over the room for any threats. Her back finally hit the double doors on the far side, and she stepped out quietly. The crossbow shifted as she felt her detective office behind her. The new environment was bare and fresh, a long dark hallway, nothing left behind. Maybe she was getting cabin fever from all this damn maze at the police station? She took that thought. If it were going crazy, she wouldn't realize it. Claire turned left from the detective office and hurried down the hallway. She could just make out the doors to the main hall ahead. She could circle back up into the waiting room and look for Jack or a corpse. She had thought to herself if he were gone, she would all be by herself in this hellhole. He seemed like a good guy, maybe a little too shady, but dark and mysterious guys weren't always that bad. She lied to herself. She'd had her share of the bad boys, the strong silent types, motorcycles, and heavy metal. Jack had struck her more of a dope with a West Coast surfer dude accent and attitude. Not necessarily her type, but they were complete opposites. He was kind of hot. Are you seriously getting a crush on that doofus? Focus up. For all you know, he's gone, and you need to survive this. She shook her off her thoughts from the door, and she jiggled the handle. What the hell? Why is it locked? He turned from the door. It didn't make sense. It wasn't locked from when she came in when she found Jack in the cells. The last time they had seen Leon was at the other side of the police station. Even if he had come through here, then why would he have started locking doors? Claire took a deep breath. Going back the way she came was out of the question. She had never gone past the holding cells, but her brother had mentioned last time she had visited, they sometimes used the holding cells to secure charged suspects before taking them into interrogation. Claire turned back. Maybe she could find something in the interrogation room doors, or at least blow some before heading upstairs to avoid Mr. X. Claire began down the dark hallway and passed by the detective office once again. At the end of the hallway there was a small lobby with the soda and snack machines. The glass was already broken on the snack machine, and someone had already raided its contents. Claire sighed and figured all the initial outbreak that must have happened too fast for anyone to start looking. Sad though, she didn't even blame on who it was. She lifted her Browning and headed down for the hallway past the holding cells. No reason to go back in there. She had to admit that being alone during this was not as easy as having someone to watch her back. The weapon shook slightly in her grasp as she turned around the corner and saw the interrogation rooms at the end of the hall. At least the hall was clear of any undead. She continued to pass through the few windows. Several zombies outside began to pound the glass with their cold, pale, bloody hands. That was taken when she heard something different. Something other than the dull pounding on the windows. Something different from the unsettling occasional moan of the far-off undead walker. A footstep echoed behind her. Someone was following her. The same someone from the detective's office? Claire sprinted forward towards the interrogation room door, and just before her, she threw open the door and slammed it behind her. She lifted her Browning and then aimed it for the sights. Claire listened carefully for the footsteps just outside. Whoever they were might pass right by. Somewhere out there in the hallway, another door closed. Claire let out a long breath before lowering her sights. Little tense, are we? Claire snapped her attention. The mirror right next to the table in the room was a one-way mirror. A calm and collected woman's voice spoke over the intercom. How long have you been following me? Claire asked. I'm sorry about your friend. He didn't deserve to go out that way. Wait, so he's really? Claire felt a ball of sadness in her chest. The thing that attacked her friend was an ex-tyrant, very lethal biological weapon. Nothing like those brainless zombies out there. I'd be shocked if he got away after that encounter that close. Who are you? Do you know of a way out of here? Claire said. The frustration in her voice was becoming more obvious by the second. You don't seem to know much for a Redfield. The woman's voice was mocking. Wait, you have seen my brother? The woman went quiet for a moment, thinking of her next move. He's not here, obviously. Seems like we're looking for someone. Who are you looking for? There was another long drawn-out silence. Claire wasn't so sure how much she trusted this mysterious woman. It didn't help that the mirror had obstructed her identity. Not important. What is important is to understand your friend is not safe. That ex-tyrant is here for him. If he somehow survived, you need to avoid him like the dead walking this place. Her voice was cautious and demanding. Why tell me this? Do you even know Jack? Do you? You only met him a couple hours ago and you're already swooning over him. You need to tell me what you know. If there's something I need to know about Jack, you must tell me, Claire demanded. What you need to do is get to the basement and get the hell out of here. Quit wasting your time in the station. The woman seemed to ignore her words completely. Just then the door slammed on the other side of the interrogation room. Who was she? How did she know Jack? Was Jack as dangerous as she claimed? He seemed sincere when he was with me. Sure, Claire, but that's how all mystery men always seem when the mystery fades away and you're left with an ass. Claire then shook it off. Obviously someone from his past. Maybe an old enemy just saw him wandering around together? That would be a big of a coincidence. Mr. X targeting Jack made sense though. After all, she was able to sneak right past the giant without getting torn into pieces. Jack wasn't so lucky. If the tyrant was out to kill everyone, it would have been burned into pieces before turning on Jack, at least in that situation. Claire raced for the door and threw it open to find the hallway empty. Whoever the mysterious woman was, she was fast. There was more going on to the police station than she had thought. If Claire was going to survive, she would need to watch her back carefully. She was sure that woman wouldn't follow her just for her to go tell her Jack the bad news. There had to be a bigger motive there. It wasn't just everyday people trying to survive anymore. It was something more complex going on.